June 14th, 1943, somewhere above the Arctic Circle. The sun never set that summer, it only rolled along the horizon, smearing the snow-covered mountains in gold and blood-orange light. Even at midnight the fjord shone like glass, silent, endless, and cold. A small German U-boat, U-492, drifted quietly between the cliffs of northern Norway. Its hull was scarred from depth charges, and smoke curled from its exhaust like a dying breath. The crew looked exhausted, faces pale, eyes red from sleepless nights. The war was far away, yet somehow closer than ever. The Arctic didn't care who was fighting, it only cared who froze first. Inside the submarine, Kapitänleutnant Otto Kruger leaned over a broken periscope, his breath visible in the freezing air. "We can't reach Trondheim," he muttered. "The engines won't make it. Prepare to scuttle." The first officer hesitated. "Sir, the Enigma machine." Kruger looked at the small, black box bolted to the steel table. To him it was both a weapon and a curse, the heart of Germany's secret communications, the machine that spoke in riddles. If the Allies ever captured it intact, the Atlantic War could be lost. "Take the codebooks," Kruger ordered. "Burn them. The machine goes to the bottom." The crew obeyed silently. Flames flickered in the control room as they tossed bundles of soaked paper into a barrel fire. Outside, ice cracked and groaned against the hull. Minutes later, a dull thud echoed through the fjord. The U-boat sank beneath the surface, carrying its secrets into the darkness. Kruger and his men escaped into a small rubber raft, their breath misting in the polar air. Above them, the Arctic sun still refused to set. 3 days later, hundreds of miles away in London, Room 40, the British code-breaking office, buzzed with nervous energy. A wireless operator shouted across the room, "New intercept, German naval message, partial transmission only, mentions U-492, scuttled near Hammerfest." At once, a young officer rushed to Commander Edward Shaw, head of field intelligence. Shaw leaned over the decoded paper, brow furrowing. "A U-boat carrying an Enigma. If that's true, it's worth more than gold." He turned to the wall map of Norway. A red pin marked the last known position. "We can't let the Soviets or Germans get it first. We'll send in a retrieval team, quietly." The plan was dangerous, almost impossible. A joint mission between British commandos and Norwegian resistance fighters would attempt to reach the wreck and recover the Enigma machine before the Germans returned. Their code name, Operation Frostlight. 4 men were chosen: Lieutenant David Mercer, a Royal Navy diver with frostbitten hands and a stubborn streak; Sergeant Colin Reeves, communications expert and former dockworker; Ingrid Dahl, a Norwegian resistance leader who knew every fjord and fishing path from Tromsø to Narvik; and Eirik Johansen, a local fisherman whose brother had been taken by German patrols. They met aboard a small trawler disguised as a whaling vessel, anchored in a remote Arctic bay. Ingrid spread a hand-drawn map over a crate. "The wreck lies here," she said, pointing to a narrow inlet surrounded by cliffs. "Depth about 60 meters, ice on the surface. A German patrol ship visits twice a week. If they spot us, we're finished." Mercer nodded slowly. "Then we'll work fast." That night, as the others prepared their diving gear, Mercer sat alone on deck, staring at the horizon. The sun floated just above the waterline, casting long shadows across the sea. It looked peaceful, almost unreal. But he knew peace never lasted here. The next morning, they set out in silence. The small boat glided through the fjord, its engine barely a whisper. Snow began to fall, soft, silent flakes that vanished on contact with the water. "Almost beautiful, isn't it?" Colin said quietly. "Too beautiful," Mercer replied. "Nature's good at hiding what's waiting underneath." When they reached the site, Mercer suited up. The water temperature was near freezing. His body tensed as the cold hit, but he forced himself deeper, guided by the thin line tied to the boat. Below him, the wreck appeared like a ghost in the green-black water. The U-boat resting on its side, half buried in silt. Inside, shadows drifted where men once lived. Mercer shone his torch through a broken hatch. There it was, the Enigma machine, bolted to the communications table, surrounded by frozen paper and shattered glass. He unclipped his pouch and worked quickly, unbolting it piece by piece. His gloved fingers went numb, his breath shallow. Just a few more turns. Then he heard something, a faint hum from above. He looked up through the murky light. A dark shape loomed on the surface, a German patrol ship. On the trawler above, Ingrid froze. "Patrol ship, coming from the north!" Colin grabbed the radio. "Mercer, you have to surface now!" Static crackled. No response. Eric's hands shook as he gripped the tiller. "They'll see us any second!" Through the fog, the outline of the patrol ship grew clearer. The black cross on its hull, the crew scanning the water with binoculars. Ingrid made a decision. Cut the light, drop the nets, act like fishermen. The Germans shouted across the water in broken English, "Identify yourselves!" Ingrid waved and called back in Norwegian, her voice calm, steady. "Just whaling, no catch today, man, only ice." The German officer frowned, then gestured for them to stay put. A boarding party prepared to lower a boat. Below, Mercer was still fighting the cold. He pulled the last bolt free, clutching the Enigma against his chest. His oxygen was nearly gone. He kicked upward through the dark water, praying he wasn't too late. When he broke the surface, the first thing he saw was the patrol ship's shadow, massive, close. He gasped for air and saw Ingrid waving frantically. She tossed a rope over the side. "Quickly!" Mercer climbed aboard, soaked and shaking, just as the German boarding team rowed toward them. Colin threw a tarp over the Enigma, hiding it beneath fishing gear. The Germans arrived seconds later. The officer stepped aboard, eyeing them suspiciously. "Fishing in a war zone?" Ingrid smiled faintly. "The fish don't know about your war." The officer snorted, glanced around, and saw nothing but nets and old crates. After a tense moment, he waved his men back. "Stay out of restricted waters," he warned. When they were gone, the group exhaled in unison. Hours later, under the eternal Arctic twilight, they set course for the open sea. Mercer sat beside the covered crate. His hands were still trembling from the dive. Ingrid looked at him quietly. "Was it worth it?" He nodded. "Every life saved from those convoys will make it worth it." As their small ship disappeared into the fog, the frozen fjord behind them fell silent again, holding its secrets beneath the ice, waiting for another sun that would never set. June 17th, 1943, North Atlantic, aboard the trawler Freya. The sea had turned grey. The ice floes drifted like broken mirrors, and the air stung with salt and cold. Lieutenant David Mercer sat on deck, wrapped in a damp blanket, staring into the mist. His hands were still cracked and swollen from the icy dive. Every time he blinked, he could still see the U-boat resting in that silent grave at the bottom of the fjord. The machine had nearly cost them their lives, and now it might save thousands. Across the deck, Ingrid Dahl brewed coffee over a small paraffin stove. The steam rose like smoke signals into the cold air. "We'll reach open sea by dawn," she said quietly. "After that, we'll signal the British submarine." Mercer nodded, but his eyes stayed on the horizon. "If the Germans haven't already realized what we took." Ingrid met his gaze. "You think they'll come after us?" Mercer didn't answer right away. He looked at the seagulls circling far above, uneasy, restless. "They'll come," he said finally. "Something like that doesn't stay lost for long." Back in Narvik, several hundred miles south, German Naval Command received a report that chilled the room. A diver team from U-Boat Command North had returned to the scuttled wreck of U-492, and the Enigma machine was missing. The officer in charge, Captain Franz Reiner, slammed his fist on the table. "Someone took it, British commandos or the resistance. Either way, they can't leave Norway alive." Reiner turned to his aide. "Send the patrol ship Nordlicht. Tell them to intercept all fishing vessels heading toward the Barents Sea. Search everything." His aide hesitated. "But, sir, how will we know which one—" Reiner interrupted, his tone cold. "We'll know. The one that runs." By midnight, the Freya was moving through a narrow stretch of open water, threading between blocks of ice like a needle through cloth. Below deck, Sergeant Colin Reeves hunched over a portable radio, trying to reach their British extraction point. The signal hissed with static. "London, this is Frostlight team," he whispered. "Cargo secured, requesting rendezvous coordinates." A faint voice crackled back. "Proceed to grid 42 north, 21 east. Submarine HMS Venturer standing by. Avoid detection." Then the line went dead. Colin exhaled slowly. "We've got a rendezvous, about 20 miles east." Mercer looked at Ingrid. 20 miles, and 100 ways to die in between. The next morning, the fog lifted, and the danger arrived. Eirik Johansen, the fisherman, spotted a dark shape behind them. "Ship on the horizon," he said. "Fast moving." Mercer raised the binoculars. Through the lens, he saw the unmistakable outline of a German patrol vessel. "They've found us." Colin's voice went tight. "We can't outrun them. Not in this thing." Mercer made a decision. "Then we'll hide." He pointed toward the coastline ahead, a jagged wall of cliffs and ice caves carved by centuries of wind and tide. "If we can get into one of those coves, maybe we can slip out of sight." Ingrid steered the trawler hard to port. The engine roared, churning up white foam as the Freya darted toward the cliffs. Behind them, the German ship sounded its horn, deep and menacing, and picked up speed. Bullets cracked the water behind them. They reached the narrow mouth of the cove just as a new wall of fog rolled in from the sea. The Germans lost sight of them for a moment, just long enough for the Freya to glide into the shadows of an ice cave. The sound of the engines echoed eerily off the frozen walls, then faded. Only the slow drip of melting ice remained. Inside, the air was heavy and cold. Their breath came out in clouds. Colin shut off the motor. "We'll freeze before they give up." Mercer crouched beside the crate, holding the Enigma. "Better cold than captured." They waited. Minutes turned into an hour. The patrol ship prowled outside, its searchlights sweeping across the water. Occasionally, the cave filled with faint flashes of light, but the fog and ice hid them well. Then, silence. The ship moved on. Ingrid finally whispered, "They're gone." Mercer leaned back against the icy wall, closing his eyes. The tension left his shoulders for the first time in days. "We did it." But the Arctic had other plans. A low rumble echoed through the cave, distant at first, then louder. Eric's eyes widened. "The tide," he said. "It's rising." Mercer looked toward the entrance. The water was already climbing the rocks. "If we stay, the ice will trap us." They scrambled into motion. Ingrid restarted the engine, but it sputtered. Frozen fuel lines. Colin grabbed a can of alcohol and tried to warm the pipe, his hands shaking. Outside, the sea roared louder. Blocks of ice began collapsing from the ceiling, splashing into the dark water. "Come on! Come on!" Colin shouted. The engine coughed, once, twice, then roared to life. They surged forward, bursting out of the cave, Just as the tide swallowed the entrance behind them, the fog had cleared, and there, waiting at the mouth of the fjord, was the German patrol ship. The Nordlicht opened fire. The first shells landed short, geysers of water exploding around them. "Full speed!" Mercer shouted. "Head for the open sea!" The little trawler leapt across the waves, engine straining. Eirik wrestled the wheel while Ingrid reloaded the flare gun, their only weapon. Colin worked the radio frantically. "HMS Venturer, this is Frostlight. We're under fire. Position 2, 0 north, 19 east." The reply came instantly. "Hold your heading. We're coming." The German ship loomed closer, its guns flashing again. Splinters of wood ripped from the Freya's hull. One shell exploded near the stern, throwing Colin to the deck. Mercer pulled him up. "Stay with me." A few 100 meters ahead, the sea rippled, a dark shadow rising beneath the surface. Then came a low hum, the unmistakable sound of a submarine surfacing. The HMS Venturer broke through the water like a metal beast, its hatches opening. British sailors waved frantically from the deck. "Come alongside, quick!" Ingrid steered hard, bringing the trawler beside the sub. The crew threw ropes, pulling them in as bullets splashed all around. Mercer and Colin heaved the crate across. The Enigma machine, their prize, was finally safe. The German patrol ship fired one last volley before turning away, unwilling to risk torpedoes from the British sub. And just like that, the sea went quiet again. Hours later, deep beneath the surface, the Venturer slipped silently south. Mercer sat in the narrow cabin, staring at the Enigma box resting on the table. It looked so ordinary now, a black metal box with round keys and dials. But it was the reason for every risk, every life they'd almost lost. Ingrid sat across from him. "Do you ever think," she asked softly, "that we're saving lives we'll never meet?" Mercer nodded. "That's the best kind to save." Outside, the Arctic light faded as they dove deeper into the dark. Above them, the endless day continued. The sun that never set, shining down on a sea that had swallowed too many secrets. June 19th, 1943, somewhere in the Norwegian Sea, the submarine HMS Venturer moved like a shadow beneath the grey Arctic waters. Every sound echoed inside its narrow steel body. The creak of the hull, the hum of engines, the whisper of men breathing recycled air. For the Frostlight team, it was both safety and prison. After days in the freezing air above, the submarine's warm, oil-scented corridors felt unreal. The world outside, the fjords, the snow, the gunfire, now seemed like a distant dream. Lieutenant David Mercer sat at a small table in the officers' quarters, staring at the black Enigma machine that lay before him. It looked harmless now, a relic of logic and levers. But Mercer knew what it meant. It was a key, and behind its teeth lay entire oceans of coded death. Across from him, Commander Shaw, the mission's overseer, leaned forward. His uniform was crisp even here under the sea. "You understand what this means, Mercer," he said. "If we can get this to Bletchley Park intact, we might read every German naval signal from here to the Azores." Mercer nodded. "We risked enough for it, sir." Shaw allowed a faint smile. "Then let's make sure it was worth it." Far above, the Arctic sky was calm, too calm. The Nordlicht, the German patrol vessel that had chased them, circled the area. Captain Franz Reiner stood on the bridge, scanning the waves through binoculars. He could feel it, the presence of something below. The British submarine hadn't escaped, not yet. "Deploy sonar," he ordered. "They're still here." The operator turned the dials, listening to the low pings echoing through the depths. "Contact at bearing 075, he said. "Depth about 80 meters. Reiner's eyes narrowed. "Prepare depth charges." The sea, moments ago peaceful, was about to erupt. Below, the first distant thud reached the submarine like a heartbeat in the water. Mercer looked up sharply. "Depth charges!" Shaw didn't flinch. "All hands, silent running." The crew moved with practiced speed. The engines slowed to a whisper. It's dimmed. Every man froze at his station, listening. Another explosion, closer this time. The walls shook, dust falling from the pipes. Ingrid gripped the edge of the table. "How close are they?" "Too close," Mercer muttered. A third charge exploded and the lights flickered. A thin stream of water trickled from a cracked pipe overhead. The submarine groaned like a wounded animal. Shaw's voice was calm, controlled. "Hold steady! They'll give up once they lose the echo." But the Germans didn't give up. The explosions came in steady rhythm, shaking the submarine deeper into the blackness. Inside the control room, Colin Reeves worked beside the sonar operator, sweat dripping down his neck. "They're trying to box us in," he whispered, "using sound triangles. Clever bastards." Mercer leaned beside him. "Can we fool them?" Colin thought for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. "We can try." He adjusted the sonar equipment, sending back a false echo in a ghost signature that mimicked a submarine breaking away to the west. Within minutes, the German pings shifted direction. The enemy believed the target was moving away. "Now," Mercer said, "dive to 100 meters." The submarine sank deeper into colder, darker water. The sound of depth charges faded, replaced by the groan of the ocean pressing against the hull. Finally silence. Hours passed. No one spoke. Every man sat listening to the pulse of the ship. Then, faintly from the intercom, came the radio officer's voice. "Message from London, sir. Bletchley requests a full transmission of the Enigma's key rotors for verification." Shaw frowned. "We can't transmit. The Germans might triangulate us." Mercer looked at the machine. "Then we'll do it old-fashioned. Copy it by hand, encode it, and send it in bursts." He began writing the sequences. Endless columns of letters, mechanical poetry made from code. Ingrid watched him, her brow furrowed. "It's strange," she said softly, "that something so small can hold so much power." Mercer nodded. "It's not just power, it's trust. Every ship in the Atlantic depends on us getting this right." That night, as the submarine cruised silently towards safer waters, Mercer couldn't sleep. He walked the narrow corridor, the low hum of engines filling the space. He found Colin in the mess hall, tuning the radio. "Couldn't sleep?" Colin shook his head. "No, the sea's too quiet." Mercer sat beside him. "You think they'll keep hunting us?" Colin shrugged. "Maybe, but they're listening to ghosts now." He turned a dial, and a faint German voice crackled through the static. Intercepted transmissions. "Search continues, area expanding east, no confirmed contact." Mercer leaned back, exhaling. "We're ahead of them. For now." The two men sat in silence, listening to the strange rhythm of foreign voices through the static, like ghosts talking through the ice. But the sea, as always, had one more test to give. Early morning, though in the Arctic summer there was no real morning, only endless light. The submarine's sonar detected something new. A faint, metallic echo ahead. "Contact," the operator said. "Stationary object, possibly ice." Shaw frowned. "Possibly?" Before anyone could answer, a scraping sound ran along the hull, long, slow, metallic. Ingrid's eyes widened. "That's not ice." The sound came again, sharper this time, a magnetic mine. "Emergency reverse," Shaw shouted. "Flood stern tanks." The submarine tilted sharply. Men stumbled as alarms rang. The sound of metal grinding filled the air. Then silence. For a few endless seconds no one moved. Then Colin whispered, "We're clear." The mine had drifted away. When calm finally returned, Mercer looked around the room. At Shaw's steady hands, at Colin's shaking ones, at Ingrid's tired but fierce eyes. "We've survived bombs, ice, and mines," Mercer said quietly. "Let's make it home before something else decides to test us." Shaw gave a faint nod. "Agreed. Set course for the North Sea. We'll rendezvous with a destroyer off the Shetlands." The engines rumbled back to life. The submarine began its long journey home through the deep. Mercer returned to his bunk, but didn't sleep. He thought of the men who had built the machine, and the ones who had died to hide it. He thought of the endless Arctic sky above them, where the sun never set and never warmed. Somewhere out there, in the frozen light, the war was still raging. But down here, in the quiet dark, they carried a piece of it, a secret that could help end it. June 22nd, 1943, North Sea, aboard HMS Venturer. The North Sea stretched endlessly, grey and cold beneath a sky that refused to decide between day and night. The Arctic light hung low, casting long shadows over the rolling waves. Inside HMS Venturer, life had settled into uneasy rhythm. The men no longer jumped at every creak of the hull, but no one truly relaxed. The war was not behind them yet. Lieutenant David Mercer sat in the control room, studying the Enigma rotors laid out on a metal tray. Each one was engraved with letters and numbers, simple and elegant. He turned them slowly, watching how they clicked into place. Every movement was precise, mechanical, and yet, to Mercer, they felt almost alive. This small machine had guided the enemy's fleets, sunk Allied ships, and dictated death across oceans. Now it was silent, and in that silence it held the key to saving thousands. Commander Shaw entered, his boots echoing on the steel floor. "London wants confirmation the rotors are intact," he said, glancing at the tray. "They are," Mercer replied. "All 5. I checked twice." "Good," Shaw said. "Then it's time to send the code home." He unfolded a sheet of paper. The latest transmission instructions from Bletchley Park. Every frequency, every cipher burst had to be exact. If a single number was off, the message could be intercepted or corrupted. Shaw looked to Colin Reeves, their radio officer. "You ready?" Colin gave a weary grin. "As I'll ever be." The submarine's radio room was small, lit by a single red bulb. The air was thick with static and the hum of equipment. Colin adjusted the dials, his fingers trembling slightly from exhaustion. "Signal's weak out here," he muttered. "We'll need to transmit in short bursts, low power, so the Germans don't catch our signal." "Do it," Shaw said. "One word at a time if you have to." The transmission began. Each click of the Enigma's rotors became a heartbeat in the silence. Mercer read out coded strings from his notes. Colin tapped them into the transmitter. The faint beeps echoed like whispers in the dark. Halfway through, the static flared, a sharp, distorted sound that froze everyone in place. "What was that?" Ingrid asked, her voice tight. Colin leaned closer to the receiver. "Jamming," he said. "Someone's trying to block the signal." Shaw frowned. "German patrol ships, they're closer than we thought." "Should I stop?" Colin asked. "No," Shaw said firmly. "Finish the message." The submarine's engines went quiet again. Silent running, every light dimmed. In the darkness, Colin kept transmitting, letter by letter, line by line. Then a burst of static cleared. The faint sound of an acknowledgement tone came through. "Message received," Colin whispered, relief washing over his face. "Bletchley confirms." Mercer let out a long breath. "We did it!" But victory in war rarely lasted more than a moment. Minutes later, sonar picked up something new, a fast-moving contact closing in. "Destroyer class," the operator said, "bearing east." The German patrol ship, Nordlicht had found them again. Shaw's jaw tightened. They must have traced the signal. Dive to 100 meters. Prepare countermeasures. The submarine sank beneath the surface once more, slipping into the dark. The hum of the engines faded to a low vibration. Outside, the sea pressed in from all sides. Then came the first explosion, a depth charge close enough to shake the entire hull.
"Hold depth!" Shaw barked. Another explosion followed, then another. The noise was deafening, a thunder that seemed to come from inside the sea itself. Men gripped pipes and bulkheads, praying silently as the metal screamed around them. Ingrid clung to the wall, her knuckles white. How long can they keep this up? As long as it takes, Mercer said, grimly. The submarine twisted through the deep, diving lower than was safe. The pressure was immense. The walls creaked, the gauges quivered. Colin, still at his station, shouted, "We're dropping too fast!" "Level her out," Shaw ordered. "Now!"
The helmsman pulled hard on the controls. The submarine steadied, groaning but holding. Then, through the chaos, Mercer noticed something strange on the sonar display. A faint echo that didn't belong. "Wait," he said, "that's not a destroyer." Shaw turned. "What do you mean?" "The pattern's wrong," Mercer explained. "Too slow, too uneven. That's another wreck." They adjusted the periscope sonar, and there it was, the ghostly outline of a sunken U-boat resting on the seabed below. Shaw's eyes narrowed. "Can we hide beneath it?" "It's risky," Mercer said, "but it might mask our signal." Shaw hesitated only a moment. "Do it!" The submarine descended carefully, settling beside the wreck. The Nordlicht circled above, dropping charges farther and farther away, their sound fading into distance. Then, silence again. They'd lost them. Hours later, the crew finally surfaced. The air above was biting cold, but it felt like freedom. The sky glowed orange from the never-setting sun, painting the waves in firelight. Mercer stood on the deck, breathing deeply. Ingrid joined him, wrapped in a heavy coat. "You ever think about what happens after?" she asked quietly. "After what?" "The war." Mercer looked at the horizon. "Every day, but I don't know if men like us will ever really leave it behind." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe we'll just have to build something better?" He didn't answer, but the words stayed with him. Below deck, Shaw drafted his report to London. Operation Frostlight successful. Enigma secured. Returning to base for extraction. He paused before signing his name, then added, "Casualties minimal. Morale high. The men performed beyond expectation." He folded the paper and placed it in a sealed envelope. For a moment, he allowed himself to exhale. The mission was nearly over, but in the North Sea, nothing was ever certain. The war still raged across continents, ships still burned on the horizon, and though the Enigma was in their hands, the true battle, the one fought with information, deception, and courage, had only just begun. As night, or what passed for it, settled again, the submarine turned west toward home. Mercer sat alone in the radio room, listening to the static hum. Occasionally, faint Morse clicks whispered through. Allied signals, German orders, the invisible language of war. He closed his eyes, exhausted, and thought of the words Ingrid had said. "Maybe we'll just have to build something better." The compass needle on the console trembled, then steadied, pointing west, toward safety, toward home, toward whatever came next. The mission was nearly done, but none of them knew yet that the hardest choice was still waiting. When they reached the surface, and the war asked them for one final sacrifice. June 25th, 1943, Norwegian Sea, west of Tromsø. The Arctic sun shimmered low across the endless horizon, casting a silver glow on the water. The air was still, unnaturally calm, the kind of silence that comes just before something happens. On the surface, HMS Ventura drifted slowly, engines off, her steel hull gleaming faintly under the pale light. The crew had been awake for more than 20 hours. The mission was nearly over. Commander Shaw stood on the conning tower, binoculars pressed to his eyes. To the west, a Royal Navy trawler approached, their extraction ship. They had done it. The Enigma and its codebooks were secure. Soon they would hand them over to British intelligence, and the Battle of the Atlantic might finally tilt toward victory. But even as Shaw lowered his binoculars, something deep inside him refused to relax. He had been at sea too long. In war, good news always came with a shadow. Below deck, Lieutenant David Mercer carefully packed the Enigma components into a watertight case. Each piece was wrapped in oilcloth, labeled and sealed. He ran his hand over the metal one last time. "It's strange," he murmured. "Something so small and yet so powerful." Across from him, Ingrid helped secure the latches. Her hands were steady now, practiced. "You think they'll use it to end the war?" she asked quietly. Mercer nodded. "That's the hope. If the code breakers at Bletchley can read every German message in real time, this could save thousands." Ingrid gave a faint smile. Then it was worth it. Before he could answer, the intercom crackled. "All crew to stations. Incoming contact off the port bow." Mercer's heart sank. Within minutes, the submarine came alive again. Boots thudded on steel decks, orders echoed through narrow corridors. "Sonar reports a fast-approaching vessel," said Colin Reeves, the radio operator. "Single signature, looks like the Nordlicht." "The same patrol ship from before," Shaw muttered. "She's followed us all the way here." "How?" Ingrid asked. "We lost her days ago." Mercer frowned. "Unless they've been tracking our radio bursts." "Impossible," Colin said. "I transmitted short range, low power." "Maybe not low enough," Shaw cut in. "Or maybe they're following the same frequency we used to contact London." A heavy silence fell over the control room. It didn't matter how they'd found them, only that they had. The Nordlicht was faster, better armed, and already within range. Shaw gave the order. "Prepare to dive. Secure the Enigma case." But before they could submerge, the first shell struck. It hit the water 50 meters off their stern, sending a column of spray into the air. The second came closer, rattling the hull. "They're warning shots," Mercer said. "They want us to surrender." "Not happening," Shaw replied. "We didn't come this far to hand it back." The third shot hit the forward deck, tearing through steel and sending sparks raining down the hatch. The smell of smoke filled the air. "Fire in the bow compartment," someone shouted.
"Seal it off!" Shaw barked. "Dive now!" The submarine slipped beneath the surface again, water rushing past the hull. The sea outside turned dark and muffled. Depth charges followed, explosions that rolled through the deep, shaking everything loose. Ingrid clutched a pipe, eyes wide. "We can't take much more." "Hold steady," Shaw ordered. "Keep her level." Down in the aft compartment, Mercer and Colin worked quickly, trying to stabilize the flooding bow.
But as they worked, Colin noticed something flashing on the radar screen, a faint pulse. Not the enemy this time, but something else. "What is that?" Mercer asked. Colin adjusted the gain. The pulse was steady, rhythmic, almost like a Morse signal. "It's coming from the trawler," Colin said. "They're sending us a message." "Can you read it?" Colin squinted, translating each flicker. "Enemy intercepting. Do not surface. Transmit coordinates. We will locate you." Mercer's eyes widened. "They're trying to guide us to them." He turned to the intercom. "Commander, the trawler's signaling us through sonar." Copy that, Shaw replied. Tell them we're alive and holding. For hours, the Venturer crept silently through the black water, following the faint guidance of the sonar pings. The Nordlicht still circled somewhere above, searching, dropping charges farther and farther away. Finally, just before midnight, the vibrations faded. The enemy was gone. They surfaced slowly, the hatch opening to cold, pure air. On the horizon, the silhouette of the British trawler appeared, small but steady, her signal light blinking in code. Safe to approach. Cheers erupted below deck. They had made it. By dawn, the Enigma case was safely transferred aboard the trawler. The crew of the Venturer watched in silence as it disappeared into the mist, bound for Britain. Mercer felt an unexpected weight lift from his chest. It was over. Ingrid stood beside him, her face calm but unreadable. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Go home," he said. "If home still exists." She nodded slowly. "And me?" "You could come to London," Mercer offered. "You've earned it." But she smiled sadly. "My war isn't over yet. There are still others in Norway who need help, people who don't even know what's coming." He didn't argue, he just nodded. "Then good luck, Ingrid." "Good luck, David." They shook hands. A brief, quiet farewell between two people who had shared something larger than survival. Later, as the Venturer turned south, Commander Shaw stood on deck beside Mercer. "The Admiralty will call this one of the great secret raids," Shaw said. "They'll give out medals, maybe even tell the newspapers someday." Mercer smiled faintly. "And yet no one will know her name." "Maybe that's how it should be," Shaw said. "Some stories are meant to stay in the shadows." Mercer looked out across the sea. The Arctic light shimmered like glass, endless and silent. Somewhere beneath those waves lay the wreck of the U-boat, the frozen fjord, the ghosts of men who had fought and died without ever knowing what they carried. Above it all, the world turned quietly toward dawn. In London, weeks later, a telegram arrived at Bletchley Park. It read simply, "Operation Frostlight completed. Enigma components recovered intact. Decoding underway." The message was archived under a file marked Top Secret, 1943. And though no one outside a handful of officers would ever read it, the ripples of that mission spread far beyond the Arctic. Within months, Allied convoys began evading wolf packs. Ships reached port that would once have been lost. The code had been broken. The tide had turned. Narrators closing words. In war, victory isn't always won by strength or firepower. Sometimes it's decided by courage beneath the waves, by hands that refused to let go of hope, by a signal that reached home through static and silence. And somewhere at the top of the world, the bridge between enemies and allies, between fear and faith, still stands unseen. Subscribe for more videos.